Hi guys, farmers as we know are not happy at the moment, and while most of the focus has been on changes to inheritance tax, campaigners like Liz Webster from Save British Farming have been highlighting other issues such as government policy over how land is used, the financial support farmers receive, and post-Brexit trade deals and how they're impacting both food security in specific and the future of farming in general. I think it's important to move away from the emotional aspect of this and look at the hard data. And what Ed Conway from Sky News presented in his report here, well, spells a very difficult future for farming in Britain. Have a listen.
Okay, so the black bits are showing you the basic farm payments, and you get those just depending on how much land you have. It used to be how much food you were producing, but now it's how much land you have. And the green bits are environmental schemes, so improving hedgerows, improving the quality of the soil and so on. And what you'll notice is, look, the old EU-style farm payments, the black bits, they're being phased out gradually over time, and it's the green bits, the environmental payments, that are growing, and by 2027, that's going to be 100%. And talk to farmers and they'll say, listen, the black bits are the bits that are really encouraging me to grow food. Talk to people in DEFRA and they say, no, listen, if you don't improve the environment, the quality of the soil, you're not going to have food security. On food security, though, it's actually worth looking back a little bit at the story here, the history of the UK and its food security. This line is showing you how much of our food we produce domestically. And back kind of before World War II, it was quite low, about 35%. Then you had all of these campaigns, digging for victory, encouraging farmers to grow more food post-1945, which, look, the line went up as a result of that, up from 35 or so percent to around 60%. Then we joined the EU, and look at that, again, went up to a post-war high. About 80% of our food was grown or reared in this country. But what's interesting is it's come down a bit, certainly, but it's been pretty steady over the last few decades, 62% in the last year, but around that 60% for a long period. And, compare the UK to other countries around the world, well, we're certainly not a winner on this. But actually, more of our food, this is the same thing, by the way, the higher the bars are, the more of your food you're producing domestically. Germany, Switzerland, they're more reliant on imports, mostly from around Europe. Japan, France, they produce more food domestically than the UK. And then look at Canada and Australia, actually producing so much food that they are net exporters there. We'll come back to that issue in a second. But a lot of people saying, listen, because of what's going on at the moment, there might be questions about food security. And it's not just changes in Brexit or post-Brexit payments from the government. It's also what's going on with, you might say, the climate or indeed certainly the weather. This is showing you how much rain, basically, we have had in the last winter. The darker this is, darker blue the bits are here, the more rain versus the historical average. And it was a really, really wet period. And as a result of how wet it was really difficult to grow wheat in particular. And have a look at what happens to the amount of wheat that we've harvested in this country. That's the red bar there. And we're going back through harvests all the way back to the 1980s. This actually was the second lowest tonnage of wheat, so the second worst harvest basically for wheat since 1984. And that's only really because those records began in 1984, so second lowest that we've got on record. So that's not good. On top of that, so the pressures from the weather, pressures from changes post-Brexit, there's also this, because we're outside the EU, we're now signing trade deals with other countries, and we've signed 2 deals with Australia and New Zealand, and one of the consequences of that is they can import more dairy and beef into the UK. So these lines are showing you imports of dairy and beef from Australia and New Zealand. That's when the trade deals came into force. Look at what happened next. Those lines shot up. So that's food coming into the UK from overseas. It's more competition for domestic farmers. So you can see, put it all together, it's getting tougher. And there's something else.
And there you have it. It's getting tougher because of a whole range of problems. So you have a change in land use. So there was a time where a lot of the funding that farmers received was from the EU, from the Common Agricultural Policy. After Brexit, that was, of course, reduced, and farmers are receiving more money now if they don't farm. So that's one aspect of the problem. Then we have the post-Brexit problems, such as lack of access to workers. So not every aspect of farming requires a huge workforce, but those that do are struggling at the moment. Fruit pickers, for example, vegetable pickers are in massive demand, and it's very difficult to get them in. There are also higher raw material costs and higher energy prices. Now, raw materials those raw materials need to be imported from the EU, and we know the problems related to that. There are also the problems of exporting. The biggest UK market, of course, is the EU. So exporting into the single market requires now more paperwork, and this is a higher cost, which makes it practically impossible for small industries. But it's more expensive also for the bigger ones. And then, as you see here as well, the unfair trade deals. So these benefit extremely well the countries like New Zealand and Australia, which are flooding almost in a sense the UK market with their produce. But it's not really going in the opposite direction. I believe it was Australia that recently rejected UK beef. So while Great Britain is importing a lot from Australia and New Zealand, not a lot is going in the opposite direction. Now, once again, we have to keep coming back to Brexit here. Changes in the EU regarding protections to the environment and food safety will have an impact in the UK, because if you want to continue to sell into the single market, you have to align your standards with the EU standards. It's interesting, he also reported how Switzerland and Germany import a lot, but they're within the EU in a sense. Switzerland, of course, not. But within the single market, it's much easier to import goods or export goods. So the UK is at a disadvantage there, of course, as well. Now, what's the future? What does the future hold? What can farmers do? While most of the focus, it seems, at the moment is inheritance tax, I think it's a distraction. I think there are bigger issues. And people like Liz Webster raise this all the time. It's not just Brexit, it's how the land is used, it's the type of support farmers receive, it's a whole range of problems that are not being dealt with. So what is the future? Is it small organic farming? Is it industrial farming, being imported from other countries, set up in the UK? I don't think most people would be willing to go down that road. But something has to be done. And when we talk about, well, let's rejoin the single market and the customs union, well, that will happen eventually. But we're talking about maybe 10 or 15 years down the road. And British farming can't wait that long. Food security is extremely important, especially as climate change is making it more and more difficult to farm. And the UK is in a very difficult spot because it's trying to import a lot of food to maintain its security when it comes to food. But internal policies post-Brexit are making it difficult to go in the opposite direction. It's stuck between a rock and a hard place. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.